The University of Alberta's Faculty of Law has suspended a professor after his comments were perceived as justifying Charlie Kirk's assassination.
Albertan separatists are displeased with Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith, after she said she would do everything in her power to, quote, prevent a referendum vote on separation.
Immigration officials in Canada are silent after True North discovered illicit online advertisements claiming to provide English proficiency exam results without the need for prospective immigrants to take an exam. Hello Canada, it's Wednesday, September 17th, and this is the True North Daily Brief. I'm Isaac Lamoureux.
And I'm Alex Zoltan.
We've got you covered with all the news you need to know. Let's discuss the top stories of the day and the True North exclusives you won't hear anywhere else. The University of Alberta's Faculty of Law has announced that a faculty member has been placed on leave following online controversy linked to Charlie Kirk's assassination at Utah Valley University on September 10th. The university told True North that it had implemented additional security measures following online comments from some of its members over the last few days. In an email to students, the faculty's dean, Fiona Kelly, said that threats have targeted faculty, staff, and student groups. Kelly's email said, quote, "The university became aware of concerning online comments involving members of our community over the last several days due to the violent nature of the attack on September 10th and the fact that it was perpetrated on a university campus. The university administration must move to ensure the safety of all faculty, staff, and students, particularly those who are targets of online threats and vitriol." In the wake of Kirk's killing, a post by University of Alberta Faculty of Law Assistant Professor Florence Ashley was widely circulated and led to widespread blowback. The university refused to confirm whether Ashley was the faculty member who was placed on leave. A university spokesperson told True North, quote, "Due to privacy and safety considerations, we cannot confirm the identity of the faculty member involved. The individual has been placed on non-disciplinary leave, a temporary administrative step taken to allow a thorough review while supporting community safety." Ashley captioned a post in relation to Ezra Klein's opinion piece titled "Charlie Kirk was practicing politics the right way." Her caption reads, quote, "You do not, in fact, ever have to hand it to the Nazis. I utterly do not care for any virtues that someone may perceive in them." So, Alex, who is this professor, and why do people feel he should have been fired?
So, Isaac, this professor is a very, I'll call them interesting character. They are an assistant university professor in law at the University of Alberta, very, very far left by most appearances. And the quote that is being attributed to them, which is a quote of concern, is, "You do not, quote, in fact, ever have to hand it to the Nazis. I utterly do not care for any virtues that someone may perceive in them." This is not a direct accusation of Charlie Kirk being a Nazi, but you could certainly make the inference that Florence is aligning him with Nazis. And I think that a lot of people feel that that is completely beyond the pale in the wake of a horrific and tragic political assassination. And some people have even gone as far as to suggest that it is a subversive justification for his political assassination. That being said, I think it's important to value freedom of speech above cancel culture as a matter of principle. I find these comments disheartening and I find them absolutely abhorrent and disgusting, but I also think that it's important to protect, above all else, our right to say things sometimes recklessly. But of course, if something it raises to the level of incitement, legally speaking, that's a whole other matter. Ultimately, it's up to every employer whether they want to keep an employee regardless of what they say. And so it's up to the University of Alberta. But just as a matter of principle, I think that it is important that free speech is protected. And I think if there's one thing that we should remember about Charlie Kirk and his legacy is that he particularly thought universities were meant to be arenas where ideas, even extremely offensive ones, can be expressed, debated, and ultimately countered with better arguments rather than being censored through administrative fiat. And so I don't think we do ourselves any favor if we allow the worst moments of speech to justify eroding the very freedoms that underpin our institutions. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's statement that she was doing everything in her power to, quote, prevent a referendum vote has rattled key figures in the Alberta independence camp. Smith's response came to a question about former Premier Jason Kenney's stance against holding an independence referendum, where he said that the vote alone would divide families, communities, marriages, and more across the province. In her response to Kenney's comments, She specifically mentioned only former Cabinet Minister Thomas Lukaszuk's pro-Canada referendum question, not the Alberta Prosperity Project's independence petition, currently up for consideration before the courts.
This is why I'm doing everything I can to prevent a vote, because Mr. Lukaszuk's vote is a yes-no question. It is a separatist referendum. He may be trying to characterize it differently. But if you ask people if you want to remain in Alberta, yes or no, there are implications if people answer no. So I have been very clear that I believe in Alberta sovereignty within United Canada. I am working with the federal government to try to address what I think are significant and real grievances that have Albertans feeling frustrated. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have a joint announcement soon, and that it'll take the temperature down on this.
Republican Party of Alberta leader Cam Davies said he thinks Smith's recent comments are at odds with the base of what her party wants. He said, quote, "Albertans want to have a vote and their voice heard on the issue." Davies and his party faced their first test in the Olds Didsbury Three Hills by-election, where he came in third place with 17.66% of the vote. The Alberta Prosperity Project told True North that Ottawa had nothing to offer that could match the prospect of separation. So, Isaac, what are the supporters of a sovereign Alberta saying about this exactly? And wasn't Danielle Smith championing the right for Albertans to decide whether they want to stay or leave just a few months ago?
Yeah, Alex. So supporters of Alberta sovereignty are making it clear they see Danielle Smith's new stance as backpedaling. For example, Republican Party of Alberta leader Cam Davies told me that when Smith says she'll do everything to prevent a vote, she's going against not just her own party's grassroots, but against Albertans more broadly. Davies said, quote, "Albertans want to have a vote and have their voices heard on the issue." He argued that Smith's new positioning is doublespeak, pointing to Bill 54, which added court oversight requirements that have now stalled the Alberta Prosperity Project's petition. Regarding Bill 54, Davies said, quote, "It was never her intention to allow this question to come to a vote. It has always been the Premier's intention to deter, stifle, and ensure that this vote never comes about." He emphasized that his party doesn't even think citizen petitions should be necessary. He said the provincial government has the power to call a binding referendum under the Referendum Act at any time and should simply do it, rather than putting independence activists through what he called make-work projects designed to deflate and tire out Alberta independence activists and organizers. He also blasted Smith's cooperation with Prime Minister Mark Carney, saying it shows the United Conservatives are, quote, "all bark and no bite." And you're right, Alex, just a few months ago, Smith was promising Albertans the opposite. She pledged to put the question of separation on the ballot in 2026 if enough signatures were gathered. And that earlier promise came shortly before her Alberta Next town halls, which will determine a series of referendum questions that can be bundled together on referendum in 2026. But now Smith is signaling that she'll try to stop any independence question from reaching voters, even as petitions from both Thomas Lukaszuk and the Alberta Prosperity Project continue to move through Elections Alberta and the courts. And Davies said that if Alberta announced a referendum on separation to occur in 8 months, and then subsequently pursued an Alberta pension plan, a provincial police force, independent tax collection, and control over immigration, Ottawa's reaction would reveal Alberta's second-class status within Confederation. And Davies said, quote, "I have no doubt in my mind that as we approach that 8-month mark for an actual referendum vote, it would be over 50%. Federal immigration authorities are silent about illicit online advertisements actively targeting newcomers to Canada with fraudulent claims about bypassing Canada's immigration language requirements. Several online ads are misleading prospective immigrants into believing they can bypass English proficiency tests and get approved for visas without taking an exam. Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada requires applicants for several work-related visas and those seeking permanent residency in Canada to have Canadian English Language Proficiency Index Program or International English Language Testing Systems accreditation or the French language equivalents to be accepted. Neither Canada's Immigration Minister Lena Diab nor the IRCC nor Paragon Testing, which runs the CELPIP program and is accredited by the IRCC to give CELPIP licensing, responded to True North's request for comments. However, Several online ads are misleading migrants by suggesting they can bypass the program's exams, upgrade their previous scores, or even purchase leaked exam questions and answers to achieve accreditation. One such ad on Facebook from the CELPIP Success Hub with study material questions and answers page tells migrants they can purchase IELTS and CELPIP scores, quote, without exam. The group claimed, quote, "We ensure that your IELTS and CELPIP scores are not only authentic but also verified in the official portal. Obtain your best IELTS and CELPIP scores without taking the exam in 2025. Paragon Testing, IRCC, and DIAB did not respond to questions regarding assurances about the integrity of language proficiency tests. So, Alex, whether these are scammers or just individuals legitimately undermining Canada's immigration system, what are some of these ads saying, and how are they targeting newcomers to Canada?
Well, I would say that they are both scammers and individuals looking to undermine the immigration system. And I would say that it is reflective of endemic fraud throughout the Canadian immigration system. They're targeting newcomers by offering them either legitimate or illegitimate ways to bypass Canadian language laws. And that ends up putting a huge strain on the entire system. As an example, Isaac, I work as a crime reporter for True North, and the amount of language interpreters that are required in particular courthouses, Toronto Armory Courthouse comes to mind. It's a very multi-ethnic city. I have seen interpreters for languages that I didn't even know existed. I actually have a bit of a list of some of the interpreter languages that I have seen in the Toronto Armory Courthouse. Of course, you have English speakers don't require an interpreter. You have French interpreters. You'd expect that in Canada, given that it's one of our official languages. But I've also seen Mandarin interpreters, Cantonese, Punjabi, you would expect. There's a large Punjabi population in Toronto. Urdu, Tagalog, Hindi, Polish, Farsi, Gujarati, Bengali, Telugu, Nepali, Pashtun, Dari, Kashmiri. This is just a small list, a sample size of some of the language interpreters that we have seen in criminal court, in particular bail court. It puts a huge strain on the entire system. And so this is not only a scam meant to take advantage of newcomers, but it also ends up undermining and putting a huge strain on a lot of our systems, including, most importantly, in my opinion, the criminal justice system, which is already under an incredible amount of strain given the recent crime wave across the country.
That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can stay on top of new episodes every weekday by subscribing to the Daily Brief on iTunes and Spotify. Also, while you're at it, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating and please leave a review.